Chuck Wayne. Chuck Wayne, February 27, 1923, July 29, 1997, was a jazz guitarist. He came to prominence in the 1940s and was among the earliest jazz guitarists to play in the bebop style. Wayne was a member of Woody Herman's First Herd, the first guitarist in the George Shearing quintet, and Tony Bennett's music director and accompanist. He developed a systematic method for playing jazz guitar. Style. Wayne was known for a bebop style influenced by saxophone players of his time, especially Charlie Parker and Coleman Hawkins. In an era when many guitarists used four-square, mandolin-style picking, with rigid up-down stroke articulation, Wayne developed a technique not widely adopted by others until decades later. He also developed a comprehensive approach to guitar chords and arpeggios based on generic tetrad forms spanning all possible inversions in varying degrees of open voicing. This highly analytic approach to the fretboard was later documented in a series of theory books, some released posthumously. Life and work. Chuck Wayne was born Charles Jajko in New York City to a Czechoslovakian family. As a boy, he learned banjo, mandolin, and balalaika. In the early 1940s, he began playing in jazz bands on 52nd Street. After 2 years in the Army, he returned to New York City, joined Joe Marsala's band, and settled in Staten Island until in 1991 moved to New Jersey. He changed his musical style after hearing Charlie Parker, recording with Dizzy Gillespie in 1945. Bill Crow writes that Wayne was one of the first jazz guitarists to learn bebop. Two examples are Groovin' High and Bluein' Boogie recorded with Dizzy Gillespie. Wayne was a member of Woody Herman's First Herd and worked with Coleman Hawkins, Red Norvo, Bud Powell, Jack Teagarden, George Shearing, Lester Young, and Barbara Carroll. During the 1950s, he worked with Tony Bennett, Gil Evans, Brewmore, Zoot Sims, and George Wallington. He was employed as staff guitarist for CBS in the 1960s. For the next 2 decades, he played on Broadway, accompanied vocalists, and performed in guitar duos with Joe Puma and Tal Farlow. Wayne wrote Sonny in honor of Sonny Berman. Years later, Miles Davis took the song, renamed it Solar, and claimed he wrote it. Wayne's Butterfingers and Prospecting have been incorrectly attributed to Zoot Sims. He died of emphysema in Jackson, New Jersey, aged 74. Recordings. Wayne recorded his debut 10 LP reissued on the Jazz Guitarist, Savoy in 1953, with Zoot Sims and Brewmore, which Fresh Sounds has since reissued along with sessions by Lou Mecca and Bill Arango as 3 swinging guitar sessions. He recorded in a trio for Tapestry 1963 and Morning Mist Original Jazz Classics 1964 and in a duo with Joe Puma on Interactions Choice 1973. He recorded an album of banjo jazz in 1963. He loved the crisp, horn-like sound that was possible with the banjo, and he predicted there would be a resurgence of interest in the banjo. Theory and technique. Chuck Wayne invented a system of playing jazz guitar that emulated the style of Charlie Parker. His system included consecutive alternate picking, chords, scales, and arpeggios. The following summary reflects material in Wayne's method books. Consecutive alternate picking. In Wayne's technique, movement of the pick comes mostly from the joints of the first finger and thumb, not the wrist, hand, or arm. The pick is not held rigidly, its angle changes slightly as it passes over the string. The tip of the pick drags slightly during each stroke so that the tip points up during a downstroke and down during an upstroke. This resembles the appoindo or rest stroke used by classical guitarists, particularly if the movement is exaggerated with slow, deliberate strokes, allowing the pick to stop on the adjacent string. When moving between adjacent strings, the guitarist continues a single upstroke or downstroke to play consecutive notes on 2 strings. Thus, When moving to a higher string higher in pitch, the downstroke continues over two strings. When moving to a lower string, the upstroke continues. When more than two notes are played on a single string, the guitarist alternates strokes or uses a slur depending on the phrasing. This technique eliminates the plinka-plinking of traditional alternate picking and allows smooth, rapid playing. In rapid passages, the right hand is typically anchored, likely by touching the pinky fingernail, to the pick guard, which itself should be placed near and slightly below the first string. A narrow pick guard for this use, usually of ebony, became known among luthiers as a Chuck Wayne-style pick guard, or more accurately as a finger rest. Some guitarists have referred to consecutive/alternative picking as spray picking, although Wayne disliked this term. Wayne was an exponent of the use of the right-hand fingers in combination with the pick. He synthesized plectrum and classical guitar technique. The pick is held in the normal way, but the remaining three fingers are used to play chords and counterpoint. Wayne often surprised audiences by using this method to play difficult Bach fugues and other pieces from classical music. His use of the technique for contrapuntal improvisation was an innovation. Chords. Wayne's chord system is based on generic chord forms, forms that have the same sonority in all keys and that do not rely on open strings or guitaristic peculiarities. Wayne observed that most guitar chords in common use do not have these properties, and that the way most guitarists play a G7 chord, for example, sounds different from the way they play a C7 or an S7 due to the different arrangements of notes. The common cowboy chords are popular because they simplify fingering, but they constrict musical options. Wayne avoided this problem. He did also use specific chord forms when appropriate, but his system concentrated on chords with universal applications. Most chord books have diagrams organized by chord name F13, GM7 Fiv or type 13th, minor 7 flat 5. Under each heading are the fingerings that show the chord in alternative inversions and voicings, generally having little in common other than a shared set of notes. The guitarist memorizes the forms, learning a few different ways to play each chord. Over time, through practical experience, the guitarist learns or decides when to use each form. When playing in BB, such a guitarist will inevitably play with a very different set of voicings from what would be used in F or Ebb, simply because the normal guitar chords in these keys have very different sonorities. Wayne tried to describe the complete scope of harmonic possibilities available on the fretboard in all voicings, given conventional guitar tuning and a human left hand. Concepts. In Wayne's system, a generic chord has 4 different notes. This includes chords like dominant sevenths, major sixths, and minor ninths, but not major or minor triads, or other specific triadic forms which Wayne concluded were rarely useful for jazz. For chords containing 5 or more notes, such as thirteenths and ninths, Wayne removed the root and other notes if necessary to preserve the generic 4-note form. Wayne's focus on 4-note generic chords reflects the realities of left-hand fingering on a 6-string guitar. 4-note chords can be comfortably played in many different voicings and fingerings, but 5- or 6-note chords work only in specific situations and defeat the purpose of a generic approach. Wayne was trying to give the guitarist the harmonic vocabulary and flexibility available to pianists. Since there are 4 different notes in each of Wayne's chords, there are 4 possible starting notes or inversions. When such a chord contains the root, it is an inversion in the traditional sense. Otherwise, it is a revoicing. For convenience, Wayne calls all such transformations inversions. The remaining notes are then arranged above it. Open voicing and derivatives. Wayne realized that the close voicing normally used on pianos, i.e. where an entire chord is played within the same octave, is not usually practical on the guitar. He found that the most useful generic fingerings could be obtained by raising or lowering one or more of the 4 notes by an octave. The following descriptions cover the main elements of Wayne's chord system, but these may be hard to visualize. Wayne's method books, listed below, are the best source for diagrams and details. Open voicing. The building block of Wayne's chord system is a form he calls open voicing, where the four notes of each chord are placed on adjacent strings, and the second note of the chord is raised by an octave. For example, major 6, open voicing, root position. A major 6 chord can be comfortably played on the bottom 4 strings by playing the root on the lowest string, and the 5th, 6th, and 3rd on the adjacent 3 strings. The second note of the chord the 3rd has been raised by an octave and placed on the top of the chord. Major 6, open voicing, other inversions. The same major 6 chord can be comfortably played on the bottom 4 strings in 3 other inversions by playing the 3rd, 5th, or 6th on the lowest string. In each case, the second note of the chord the 5th, 6th, or root, respectively, is raised by an octave and played on the 4th string, deriving 7th chords. These 4 major 6th inversions can easily be changed into other chords. For example, dominant 7ths are obtained by raising the 6th by 1 fret. Major 7ths are obtained by raising it 2 frets. The chord family remains the same, with its basic 4-note structure, the use of the 4 inversions, and the basic open-voiced shapes. Every 4-note chord thus has 4 possible open-voiced inversions, though not all are practical using human fingers. Chords that omit the root. A minor 9th chord in open voicing is formed by starting with a dominant 7th form, lowering the 3rd by 1 fret, and raising the root by 2 frets. The resulting chords contain the minor 3rd, 5th minor 7th, and 9th, but no root. Omitting the root leaves the harmonic sense intact. It is generally supplied by a bass player or by the listener. Low, middle, and high voicing. With slight fingering changes, the open voicing forms can be played on any 4 adjacent strings, not just the lowest 4 strings. These are sometimes referred to as low, middle, and high voicings. Other generic voicings. Working with the basic open-voiced generic forms, it is possible to raise or lower individual notes by an octave to create additional voicings with an even more open sound. For example, consider an open-voiced major 6th chord, starting with the root on the 6th string. Spread voicing. Remove the second note from the bottom of the chord the 5th in this inversion, and move it up an octave by playing it on the 2nd string. Wayne calls this spread voicing. The chord consists of a bass note, a gap, and 3 notes on adjacent strings. Spread voicing can be used with all of the open voicing inversions by raising the second note of the chord by an octave. Split voicing. Similarly, remove the 3rd note from the bottom of the chord the 6th in this inversion, and move it up an octave. Wayne calls this split voicing. The chord consists of notes on 2 pairs of strings split by a gap. Octave voicing. Similarly, replace the top note of a spread voicing chord with the octave of the chord's second note. Wayne calls this octave voicing. It removes the top pitch from the chord, instead creating a 3-note chord that is influenced by 4-note harmony. Closed voicing and specific chords. Wayne's system also includes some closed voicing chords and a number of specific chord forms that have special uses. But the main thrust is on the family of open, spread, split, and octave forms in all inversions. Use of Wayne's chords. Jazz musicians are very much attuned to how open a chord sounds. Generally, the more open the voicing, the less chance of conflict between the chord and melody or improvisation. For this reason, while comping, Wayne especially used the spread and split voicings, which have the most open sound in his system. The other forms, being more closed, are often chosen in arrangements using counterpoint and melody. However, there are no hard and fast rules for choosing a particular form in a given situation. Surprisingly, Wayne's approach reveals many chord forms that are comfortable to play but rarely seen, except in classical guitar fingerings. This is particularly true of inversions that begin on the 3rd or 6th/7th, and also of certain split and spread voicings. In Wayne's heyday, experienced guitarists were often puzzled to watch him playing chord shapes that they didn't even recognize, chords with subtle differences from the norm. Wayne's novel strategy gave him an exceptionally wide harmonic palette, helping him avoid the sameness often found in the playing of guitarists, even some great ones. Scales, scales. Wayne's scale fingerings were designed to maximize use of consecutive/alternate picking, and thus to provide a legato feel. His basic scale fingerings are simple, although he also created various extended forms. Like his analytic approach to chords, his scale fingerings provide a single structure that can be applied to a variety of scale forms. The simple rule for transverse diatonic, melodic minor, and harmonic minor scales is 2-3-3-3-3-2-2, where each number represents the number of notes to play on each string from low E to high E strings. The simple rule for his extended fingering is 3-3-3-3-3-5 strings. Wayne provides many other fingering patterns in his scales method book. The idea behind all of the various fingerings is that the student will be able to quickly learn the fretboard. In this way, the player can create melodic lines that sound the best. The fingering patterns are practice exercises. However, by generally playing 3 notes per string, consecutive picking across adjacent strings occurs frequently throughout the scale when forming a melodic line. Arpeggios, octaves. Another dimension of Chuck Wayne's style was his method of playing octaves. Since Chuck Wayne was an advanced classic guitarist as well as a plectrum player, he combined the two forms to play octaves. His right hand held the pick between the first finger and thumb to play the low note of the octave. His middle finger and ring finger alternated to play the upper note of the octave. His left hand used the skip one string form, which is using the index finger for the low note and the fourth finger for the upper note. Regarding 2 octave spans, to keep the left hand in position, the fourth finger is used to play the lower note, and the first finger is used to play the upper note using the skip 2 strings form. Putting it all together. The figure below depicts the major 7th tetrads and the minor 9th equivalent for the spread voicings, as well as the arpeggios and the basic scales that correspond to one another in Chuck Wayne's complete system of jazz guitar. The vertical bar on the left of the charts marks the tonic on the low E. Notice that the minor 9 framework does not have a tonic root, since the first note is the 9th. Discography. As leader, The Jazz Guitarist Savoy 1956, String Fever Vic 1957, T7, Tapestry Focus 1964, Morning Mist Prestige 1965, Interactions with Joe Puma Choice 1974, Skyliner Progressive 1976, Traveling Progressive 1980, As Sideman with George Shearing. I Hear Music MGM 1955, Touch of Genius MGM 1955, A Shearing Caravan MGM 1958, A Jazz Date with George Shearing MGM 1961 with others, Tony Bennett, Cloud 7 CBS/Sony 1975, Tony Bennett, My Heart Sings Columbia 1961, Joe Bushkin, In Concert Town Hall Reprise 1964, Warren Chiasson, Point Counterpoint Empathy 1986, Don Elliott, Love is a Necessary Evil Columbia 1962, Gil Evans, New Bottle Old Wine World Pacific 1958, Gil Evans, Great Jazz Standards World Pacific 1959, Dick Katz, P&L and Penn Atlantic 1959, Beverly Kenny, Like Yesterday Decay 1959, Hank Jones, Chuck Wayne, George Duvivier, Charles Persip, Now Dig This, Dig This, Dig This, /Jazz in 2 Keys Music -1, 1959, Clifford Jordan, These Are My Roots Atlantic, 1965, Duke Jordan, Misty Thursday Steeplechase, 1978, Rolf Kuhn and His Sound of Jazz Urania, 1960, John Mehegan, Casual Affair T.J. 1959. Big Miller, Did You Ever Hear the Blues? 1959. Marion Montgomery, Swings for Winners and Losers Capital, 1963. Tony Perkins, On a Rainy Afternoon, RCA Victor, 1958. Jimmy Rainey, Chuck Wayne, Joe Puma, Dick Garcia, The Foremost Guitars, ABC Paramount, 1957. George Wallington, The George Wallington Trios, Prestige, 1968. Frank Wess, Flute Juice Progressive, 1981.